I mentioned in another video that HSBC loans kept the Qing dynasty around longer than it should have been, but in this video I'm going to argue that environmental disasters and the pro-government response to them brought it down sooner than foreign wars did. So to start off, China's population doubled in the 18th century from about 150 million to 300 million. Then in the next half century, until just before the British arrived, there was another 150 added, so that's 450 million people. And the Qing dynasty didn't upscale the number of officials to go along with the population increase. So some of the lowest level officials were responsible for about 250,000 people, and of course resources were strained. Plus a lot of the crops they were growing to help try and end the hunger was like sweet potato and stuff from the New World, and this just led to soil erosion along the Yangtze River in particular, which worsened the situation when floods hit, but I'll get onto that in a little bit. Anyway, famine struck quite a few times in the 19th century. For instance, in the 1870s it hit after a drought, and about 10 million people were killed in just a couple years in northern China. By this point though, heavy taxation, inflation and corruption had driven a lot of the government's power into the hands of secret societies and warlords, so very little aid could be given. And some European commentators said that people were making cakes out of grass, they were eating rats, and one survivor said that she ground up bricks to eat the dust. But this was just one of many famines that hit China in the 19th century, and all of them killed millions. Of course in the 20th century too there were many famines that killed many more, but in the 19th century there was also disease. In fact, in the 1850s bubonic plague broke out, killing millions across China, and it was often spread from province to province by rebellion soldiers. But I'm going to focus on an often forgotten flood in China. But first of all, I'm in Henan, specifically supposedly the last Maoist village in China. And this region has been hit by floods numerous times in recent years. For instance, in 1887, a flood destroyed, once the dikes broke not far from here, a flood destroyed about 50,000 square miles of land, spread disease, left a couple million people homeless, and around 1 million dead. But this wasn't the most deadly flood to hit the province. The most deadly flood happened in 1938 when the Japanese threatened to take Zhengzhou, which is a couple hours north of where I am and where I'm going to next. Anyway, the nationalists flooded the river, but it was a disaster. Millions of people were killed, millions of people were homeless, and it helped start a flood in 1942. Plus that killed even more people, and all of that drove more people to join the communists. But this isn't even the only time somebody flooded the Yellow River and it ended in disaster. For instance, in 1642, the Ming were trying to stop a peasant army from taking Kaifeng, a once important city, but they ended up destroying the city and killing most of its population, and the city has never really recovered from it. But to fully understand why I think the flood in 1855 was the most important, is you have to realise that from about the 12th to the 19th century, the Yellow River ran southeast to Nanjing, and from there it joined the Grand Canal, and the Grand Canal connected Beijing, Nanjing with the rest of China. It was very bloody important. But this flood was so great that it changed the course of the river, so it ran about 350 kilometers north. The Grand Canal in the course of the Yellow River was so important to China in the past that in the 17th century about 4% of China's national treasury was spent on maintaining the route. Plus in 1605 about 500,000 men worked on draining sections of the river. After all, thousands of people depended on this river. But the Qing dynasty just started to ignore the maintenance of the river. So as officials started to embezzle money, silt built up in the river and it flooded and it changed its course, rendering the canal useless. So hundreds of thousands of people were left unemployed and millions of people were left isolated from Beijing and Nanjing. In fact, many of the people who were left unemployed went on to go join secret societies like the Small Swords, or went to go join the ongoing Taiping Rebellion. So the famines, plagues and floods left tens of millions of people dead, even more unemployed, and provinces cut off essentially from the capital. Meanwhile, the Qing government did very little to help them out or prevent future disasters from occurring.